Hi, welcome to advanced training for NetPoint. You have Dr. Vivek, the lead developer, and myself, the COO. And I think there's probably not a question related to NetPoint that you could ask the two of us that we couldn't answer. I've been around NetPoint since before it was a glimmer in Dr. Gee's eye. We've been in from the start, and here we are today with some new versions and new cool tools coming out. I said in preparation for this that we should talk a little bit about the layout manager. That's an area that has tremendous power, but I think is misunderstood, like many superheroes through history. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about resources. I think some folks don't even know that NetPoint has resources, and they're super helpful. And Dr. Vivek's going to talk a lot about interacting with P6, moving files back and forth, some tips and tricks to look for there. So feel free to interject if you feel like you need to or want to. Looks like we have about 35 folks on with us at the moment. And so if everybody asks questions all the time, that might get a little distracting. So we're just going to play this by ear. I'm just going to start myself with the projects that I'm working on here to show you. And then if we need to change things, we'll change them. Okay, so this is a fairly detailed schedule for NetPoint. Let's just check the stats on it. Oops, off there again, Vivek. I can't seem to drive this thing. Okay, well, there's something going on here, Vivek. What on earth? Okay, well, so this is a fairly detailed schedule. It's a big schedule, and it may be a locked up schedule, I think. Oh wait, no, there it's moving. Okay, it's big enough that I think it's causing some delay, and probably the casting as well. Because when I was running it this morning, I was not running into these problems, but I can see now that it's a spider web of unhappiness that's causing issues. So this is why the development team is working day and night to make a faster, more efficient NetPoint. So I'm going to click more slowly. Goes against my my general nature, but I'm going to try to calm myself. So yeah, we have 220 activities, a bunch of links, 285, a bunch of redundant links. I just want to say I didn't make the schedule. And this is going to give me an opportunity to show you some of the power of the layout manager, because we're going to go from this spaghetti factory here that's pretty unusable and build a schedule automatically that is usable, readable. So let's start out with just kind of a quick tour here. On the first screen of the layout manager, you have your current layouts. You can create layouts, you can delete layouts, whatever you need to do. This is really the sweet spot for a layout manager as far as I'm concerned, and that's where you can sort a schedule either by codes or by the work breakdown structure, and it just offers so much power to the schedule. So let's just run this exactly as it is, just work breakdown structure. That's all level one. We're just going to run this, and it'll take a minute to sort through all these activities. It's going to rearrange them into their own swim lanes. And the swim lanes will be based on the work breakdown structure. So you can also code the schedule. And I've seen elaborate coding systems that get you, for instance, one coding system could say where physically on the job site will the work be performed. And another one could say what trades are involved. And so you can swim lane that directly into the system without having to drag things meticulously one by one, which is actually, in the early days, that's what we used to do before development team figured out this now patented, is that right? Now patented approach to arranging the network.
Actually, patent pending.
Patent pending. Okay, well, with our hit ratio, it's almost inevitable it will become patented. So, so you can see now we're starting to get some structure to the schedule. It's starting to make a little bit more sense. Let's just take a cruise over to the left here once this finishes processing, and take a look at the swim lane here. I've lost my mouse because I have two screens. Okay, the mouse is back, and we're going to scoot over here to the left. And you can see here that, let's actually find out which element of the WBS we're on here. So this is, and let's just scoot up a little bit. Construction area 1 is this swim lane. And you can see here that this is actually now usable, readable schedule information. You can see the activities, what's flowing from one activity to the next, the gaps in between. You can see some areas are a little more intense in terms of depth and density. And sometimes you may want to zoom in on those and get a better view. So you can use the zoom feature here. And so you can tell that the inherent algorithmic way of resorting the schedule has tremendous advantages, because you can take larger schedules and break them down in understandable chunks. You can arrange the activities in the schedule based on any coding system that you can imagine. And I think I already mentioned trades and geographic location and things like that. So there are some things, this WBS elements, all these WBS elements are being pulled in from a P6 XER. And we just automatically pick the color, the default color that was in the WBS from P6. And Vivek, feel free to chime in at any time and correct my mistaken speech or whatever, okay?
Okay.
So far, so good?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So let's take a look at this, go back to the layout manager. And layouts are basically cost-free. I mean, it takes you a minute to generate them, but you can regenerate as many times as you need to. You can change options. So let's do that. Let's go back to structure, and we're going to do the same sort, but we're going to do it a little differently this time. So we're going to change it from code to WBS, and then we're going to change it from level 1 to level 2. And then we're going to uncheck construction area 1. And we're going to take this swim lane. Actually, let's go with delivery of materials instead. Okay, we're going to take that potential swim lane, and we're going to configure it. And in configuration, you have the ability to change the color and of the assigned objects. So we're going to say we want this to be yellow, kind of to match the WBS element in the system. And display the lane on the campus, yes. Pre-construction, yes, okay. So now when we run this layout, we're going to see how that impacts the look of it. You can start to see already that stair delivery has turned yellow. This is a great way to work through and code the network any way you want. In this moment of silence, while the schedule recalculates, I'll also be talking about, and I'll need your help on this one, Vivek, on the placement section. I want to talk about that, but I'm not very skilled at it. So you would be well to prepare yourself for an onslaught of need from me in that section.
Absolutely. That's the only word it seems like I have to say.
So you can see how it's running through, and maybe while this is finishing up, you could just give people a little bit of an insight into algorithmically how you and the team figured out how to do this.
Yeah, so the basic idea between in this algorithm is the idea of removing clashes or minimizing clashes. And basically the algorithm overall puts a penalty for every clash that it identifies. So overall, the system is now then trying to minimize the total sum penalty that it sees. So it becomes more of an optimization problem at that point to minimize it.
And what role did float chain have to do in this process?
So there are different ways that Autograph kind of provides you. Float chain is one of them. The idea that you would want objects that belong to a float chain close together. So if that is what you're looking for, you would look at the float chain. So kind of think of the most popular float chain, which will be the critical path itself, or the longest path. People would want that to be kind of, if they were laying the entire schedule, not into swim lane, but just as a normal in a single lane, just as a normal schedule without swim lanes, then likely many people might want that critical paths to be more continuous in a single grid as far as possible, or as close to that grid as far as possible.
Right. Yeah, and I think, I mean, in the last session, I was mentioning NP complete problems, and I think approached in the wrong way, this could become one of those. Like, it's not really practically solvable in a short amount of time.
Oh, it is that, and yeah, it's more of a it is more of a brute force. So you are not really finding the absolute minimum over here. We are not really trying to do that. That will become an NP incomplete problem for it.
Right.
So we do find a local minimum which does the job, and therefore from where you start can have an impact on the final solution.
Great. Okay, so we've created another layout, and you can switch to different layouts anytime you want. So you could say apply this layout, and so you're taking that same schedule data, but looking at it through different lenses. And different consumers of schedule data have different needs. So it makes so much sense to be able to say, well, okay, I want to the guy who's in charge of let's say logistics for the job site. They want to see, what's where, when, are we going to have a problem laying down the 600 tons of steel that is coming in because we have a crane in the way or something like that. And you can see those things in a schedule laid out that way. I can remember we worked on the World Trade Center rebuild with the Lower Manhattan Command Center. And one of the big logistical problems for that area is it's very crowded. You had an active train station that had tons of passengers coming through every day in the middle of the job site. And you had, busy Manhattan streets, and you needed to find a place to lay down the steel. And, security was a big concern because it was a big concern at that site. So having the ability to sort schedules and look at them in different layouts is a great way to be able to share information that's relevant to the individual stakeholder. So let's take a look at this layout too. And you can rename these as well. So layout 2 looks, this looks like we're in pre-construction here on this top swim lane. And you just have run another one, change it, update it. Vivek, can you remind me how to rename this layout? Oh,
yeah, just type, just click and type.
Oh, thanks. Somebody in our neighborhood just started up a leaf blower, so if you hear some extra background noise, let me know and I can try to tune it down a little bit on my microphone. So this is kind of the basics. There's also the ability when you have a layout to change the structure of the layout, to configure different options like use the WBS name for the lane display. You can also, as I showed earlier, change the color of the assigned objects. That's kind of funny too, because I changed it to the objects to be yellow and the background on that swim lane was yellow. So that was not quite the perfect choice on my part. Vivek, can you talk a little bit about the placement screen?
Yeah, so on the placement screen, we basically have certain settings that allow you to say how you want the schedule to be laid out. So basically, if you look at the first one, the grid placement and start at, you have three options over here. Whether you want to start laying from the middle so that it can place objects both above and below that main chain that it will lay out. So if you want like your main critical path to be more towards the middle of the schedule and then objects around it based on it. So you choose halfway grid, but if you want it to be at the top grid, the first paths that you place, you choose the top grid versus the bottom grid. And again, more options like these. Then you have layout spacing, which says, yeah, do you want an extra grid to be placed in between every object that you have? So if you have larger descriptions, if the grid spacing is too small, then it will start clashing. So you kind of allows you to add some grids in between, empty grids in between. Do you want to hide links which have gaps which are too large? So rarely non-driving links. So like in this case, the default setting is at 1,000 days. If you have a link that spans more than 3 years, then yeah, do you really want that or not? And do you want to show links between lanes? Again, you can control that. Those are more like interdepartmental, or means if it's a WBS kind of a link, maybe it has some value, maybe it does not because of how it is. And again, we introduced with Autograph a new algorithm to kind of automatically identify redundant links. So you can factor those out completely from your layout. So like in this particular schedule, I think we found quite a few redundant links.
48, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and here is a list of one, and you could just say hide. You can actually delete all the redundant links, or you can fade the redundant links, whichever way you want to go. You have more settings and controls kind of to say how that algorithm actually behaves and lays out your schedule.
And so when you do that, do you have to rerun it, or does it?
So delete and highlight and restore, all of them are without running. So you can delete them without running another, because it will permanently basically delete those links from your schedule. You not have them.
Cool. And then on the stats screen, we kind of lay out for you where the schedule is right now from a statistical standpoint. Part of the way the algorithm works is it keeps score, and we punish you for things that we think are not a good practice, like links crossing over other activities, logic ties. What are some of the other punishable offenses?
Yeah, the biggest punishable offense would be a horizontal moving link lying underneath an activity.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
there is no way that you can identify whether it is actually connecting to that activity or actually just passing through and going to another activity on the other side.
And that's a class 1 felony, I believe, in scheduling, NetPoint scheduling. And I think we have some control too over what's important to you as an end user. If you really get into this, and I don't know too many folks who have really delve deep in this, but you can actually tune the reward and punishment system for a point within the algorithm.
Yeah, so if you go on the links tab, there is the arrow right next to it. On the link, the arrow next to the links tab, and that has the penalties tab hidden inside of it. And as you can see, yeah, crossing an activity, crossing another link, that's the penalties that we are looking for. And if you have that, then Yeah. So like I said, over here, if you see, we say cross as an activity and cross as another link. We don't have overlays an activity.
Yeah.
That's an absolute no-no. That autograph will never let it happen. So that's one thing we don't let the users control.
And you know, the thing is that drawing a NetPoint schedule is an art as well as a science. And I can remember early on, we would run an autograph and then I would do my best to beat the autograph. And sometimes my score was a little higher, but I still liked the way it looked better when I manipulated it. So it's up to you, but it's just a fantastically powerful tool that I think probably people don't stumble across as often as they might. And so I wanted to highlight it today. The schedule's actually starting to give me a headache. So let's change to something a little cleaner. I feel relaxed suddenly, much more relaxed. I'm gonna grab this top bar up here and stretch it a little bit. There we go. And so this nice tabula rasa here, I'm gonna add just a couple activities and then we're gonna talk about resources for a minute. So we'll do rough-in carpentry, and then electric, and plumbing. So now we have these three activities up on the screen, and I'll go ahead and link them all together. This morning I showed you the way to link one at a time. But if you have a chain of finish to starts, you can select them all at the same time and hit the link chain, and then they'll all link automatically, which is pretty nice. I can remember in the early days, you know, selecting, linking, selecting, linking, all the way across the page. So now we're going to add some resources here. So we go to the tools, manage resources option, and we'll create 3 new resources. We'll say electrician, and that is not a commodity. Having recently had a quote for an electrician to come out to the house, that is, I wouldn't even call that labor. I think that's a profession at this point. At the rates that they're getting, it's definitely a profession around the Seattle area. And we'll do something funny for electrician like black. So that's the color of the wire you don't want to grab onto. So that'll be our electrician. And then let's create another new one. Let's say plumber, and another profession if there ever was one. And for plumber, yeah, I know I could get pretty funny, but I'm going to be pretty straightforward and go for blue for water. How about that?
You have it marked as a commodity though.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. And these category things, they don't really make a big difference. You can export this information out to Excel. And so if you're thinking of parsing it in some way in Power BI or something afterwards, you might want to be a little careful about those, but typically they don't make a big difference. And then what was the last one? Carpentry, carpenter, yeah. So we're gonna have a carpenter here. And that's also a profession. We're going to make them all professionals today. And carpentry is going to be the color of wood, I think. So let's see. There's nothing very woody there, is there? Stained wood. How about that? Okay. So now we'll add that. So now we have 3 resources and 3 activities. And we're going to assign the resources here. We're going to need 5 electricians a day. And let's see, that's for electrical, okay. And then we're going to change from electrical to plumbing. And we'll say we need 10 plumbers. And we'll assign that. And then for carpenters, we'll need 10 as well. Okay, so there's our plan now. We have 3 resources and they are assigned to their activities. And now pops up a beautiful histogram at the base of the screen showing you your resource consumption by activity and by resource assignment. And if you we're curious to see what's what, you can go click on the view resource key and that will show you each of those. And if you wanted to temporarily have one of the histograms fall off, you can uncheck and check it. That'll help you with that. I'm not a big fan of this is a cumulative curve and we have all 3. We have the late, the early, and the planned cumulative curve for the assignment of resources here. And you know, NetPoint's very agnostic about how you assign resources. So for instance, you may not want to assign individual electricians. Maybe it's a crew of 4. And so instead of saying 4 there, you would say 1. You just have to figure out how you want to apply the resources and then apply them to the chart. Let's go ahead and change how this is laid out a little bit. So in the resource display settings, you can control what shows up. So I'm just going to go with the baseline cumulative, and I'm going to put a plot ruler on that so we can see where we're heading with the cumulatives. And this controls how much of the screen gets taken up by the histogram. And you can determine how you would like the totals to calculate. So I'm just going to leave it as daily. So now we've made that change. And you can see a couple of these lines for the cumulative are gone. Now we have this. Yeah, we got 1,000. Wow, we got 1,000. I think this project's in trouble already. We just started. Now, what if, in fact, we couldn't have that many carpenters? There's some sort of resource limit. How would we model that in the system? Well, you go back to managing resources and you click on limit, and we're going to limit carpenters to, let's go with something about midway. So we'll say for carpenters, that's your limit. And now we're done with that. And if we get out here and we click up at the top here where it shows resource limits, now you can see where you're actually over on carpenters. So that's kind of a problem. You're going to have to extend the duration of this if you can only have 5 carpenters, and you're not going to get the work done as quickly. So this is great for planning resources. If you have a situation where, let me just break this link for a minute. If you have a situation where you have resources assigned to multiple activities over a single time period, you can see how the resource histogram kind of levels that. So this is a quick way to get a hold of things. And I've seen the most creative ways of using this. I'll just give you a couple examples from the field. You know, in offshore oil extraction, the limiting factor is the people on board, the POBs. And that's determined, how many POBs you can have is determined by how many places there are to sleep. And so there's this constant tension between the kind of maintenance crew and the operations crew in terms of how many folks are on board. They need a certain number of people just to operate the platform. But if they, let's say that they're in the Gulf Coast, it's hot, and the air conditioner breaks. Well, they're going to need a team of 3 or 4 people out there for the air conditioner, but they only got 2 beds open. And I've seen people use this resource limit capability to determine, okay, they actually just draw a line using the shade across the screen. So let me do that. And this is your max. This is your max people on board line. And you can just put a little text box in there to show that. And so, you know, if any of these go above that, that you're going to have some work to do because you can't have more than that line. And so what they did is part of their real problem was communicating with each other, because there's one group out on an oil platform, and the only way to get there is via helicopter or boat, and the other group is at headquarters, in New Orleans, in a big office building. So using a classic CPM schedule with the waterfall and everything, it wasn't really practical to work through that together. But what they could do is just share a screen on NetPoint and talk through it. And if it's 100 degrees out on the platform, they're going to find a way to get a few of those operations people off to make room for the air conditioning crew to come in. And so that level of communication, that interactivity, saved a ton of cycles and really helped out. We have another application that's actually in the manufacturing field, and they are using NetPoint to plan manufacturing and delivery, but one of their constraining factors was inspection. They needed a certain number of people to be able to do inspection, and if they had too many programs producing simultaneously, then they would overwhelm their inspection capabilities. So they use the resource constraint to talk about how can I plan my production so that I keep my inspection people busy but not overwhelmed. So that's the quick insight into both Layout Manager and resources. And I'm going to give Vivek an opportunity to take the lead here.
Now I will kind of talk more about working with other CPM tools. Means the options that you have from NetPoint. NetPoint can import and export schedules with P6, Microsoft Project, and OpenPlan, these three tools. And the options all are within the file menu, import, export, and then thereon. So over here, I will focus more on the import export process with Primavera, but kind of the similar processes apply to these other MS Project and OpenPlan. So one important thing to remember between transferring data between NetPoint and P6 is NetPoint has certain features that P6 does not support, and it's the other way too, that P6 has certain features that NetPoint does not support. So one of the biggest feature within NetPoint is the idea of planned dates because of the GPM algorithms that it can support. If you have activities that are on planned dates, when you transfer them over to P6, when you schedule them, those activities will fall back earlier to their early start dates. And that is just how the CPM algorithm works. So the one option that you have is kind of, if you wanted to preserve those dates, is to actually constrain the activities within your schedule onto, so let's say in this case, if it was equipment procurement, which was, let's say, on a planned date, and you wanted to export this, so it goes into the properties, go into the dates, and just constrain it with a start no earlier than. So that would be one way to do it, but how do we actually find activities that you want to need to constrain? To do so, you can actually look at the drift values. So you can actually go into search and filter objects. You can say objects, activities, delays. You can even do start, finish, milestone, start. Benchmarks don't really have drift, so let's leave those off. And drift greater than 0 and add to list. At this point, I don't need to save this filter. So you can see that there are objects within your schedule that do have positive drift. In this particular case, equipment procurement is one of them. Because equipment procurement has drift, the install, connect, process equipment, which then connects to it, has drift. You also see 2 milestones, or actually 3 milestones, that have drift, and that is because they do not have a predecessor, or basically not have a predecessor that it links, that it will connect to eventually. So it will fall back earlier in that case to the early start dates, and that will be the project start for these milestones. So in this particular case, because equipment procurement and install connect process equipment both have drift, you do not necessarily have to constrain both. You only have to constrain the activity that generates the drift, which in this particular case is equipment procurement. Let me turn on the drift and float for both of these activities so you can see that happen. So we see both of them have some drift. There is some less drift on the install connect process equipment than equipment procurement. And that's because of the float on the activity itself. So let me go into properties, dates, and I'll start no earlier then. So once you do that, you see equipment procurement drift went down to 0, and so did install connect process equipment. So you didn't have to constrain both of them. Just constraining equipment procurement would ensure that install connect process equipment does not move when you move it to, when you export the schedule out and import it into P6. Other similar things that work or are there is the resources. So NetPoint actually allows you to have resources both in days and over the duration of the activity on the same activity. P6 does not let you do that. It has to be one way or the other for each activity. So eventually when you actually export out to, from NetPoint to P6, it will give you an option to kind of make those kinds of conversions and things like that. Another part of the puzzle is, I will show you a little later, in how things are different depending upon where the schedule starts from. So as Tim was showing you a little earlier, when he imported an XER file, it came in as a spaghetti bowl of links and activities mixed in. That happened because P6 does not have the same positioning capabilities as NetPoint does. So no grids and nothing, everything falls into a table, and each row kind of gets a single activity. So P6 schedules don't have the same positioning capabilities. So when they are brought into NetPoint, the tool basically does not know how to place them at that point. And that's why Autograph comes in and allows you a quick way to kind of give you a presentable schedule, something that you can look at right away without having to manually go in and place each individual activity. However, now once you have brought it in to NetPoint, you have done all the work to place activities just the way you wanted. Or maybe you actually just build the entire schedule in NetPoint itself. So now this particular schedule has all the positioning that it needs. All the activities are positioned on grids. Milestones have their own positions. So now if you send the schedule out to P6, NetPoint ensures that it will remember those values when it comes back in again for those schedules from P6. And I will demonstrate that in a little bit, kind of as we go into the process. So let me start by first exporting the schedule out into P6. So we go into File, Import, Export, and Export to Primavera. The tool asks for a P6 project ID. You can pick any text over here. And for now, I have picked as demo scenario. This is an important thing to remember, because if you are if let's say you have 3 trades bringing in their own schedules and you want to combine them all into one P6 project, then they would have to come in with the same project ID. I'm also ensuring right now that all my calendars are created in P6 as global calendars. I've also marked my project codes to be exported as activity codes in P6. And as I had mentioned earlier, for resources, I want them to export to P6. And any activity that has mixed assignments, I want to convert all the assignments to per day for that activity. I can even convert it for all assignments, irrespective of whether they are mixed or not, if you wanted to go that way. Another important difference between NetPoint and P6 is in NetPoint, if you're working on a day schedule, you have 24 hours in the day. There are no shifts and things like that, no working periods within the day. But if you wanted to set in some working hours for P6, then you can actually set them. You have a couple, you have these two set values, or you can even define your own custom periods using the start time and end time over here.
I think that was Sydney, one of our end users, famous end user who requested that. You know, the interface between NetPoint and P6 has a long and tortured history. We started with SDEF, which was the Army Corps of Engineers scheduling definition file, which had some severe limitations. I think it was 40 characters for description or something like that. And then we wrote an API interface to P6, but then at some point, Primavera or Oracle turned off the API. So then we had to start from scratch, and thank goodness we figured out to use the XCR file, and that's actually been pretty functional for us.
Yeah, so basically all of these values at some point were requested mostly. So like working hours came from our users. The thought of being able to send out calendars to be global calendars versus project calendars came from our users and other things too. So again, yeah, as and when users request, they are prioritized, all issues are prioritized and implemented at some point. Okay, so for now, I'll switch back to the standard hours, 8 hours per working day. I'll click next. It gives you an idea of what you're trying to export, and we just export at this point. It will ask you for a file name to choose. Let me pick my desktop, and I'll save it as demo scenario.xcr, or let's say conference demo scenario.xcr. Okay. Now I move over to P6. Okay. I have the instance running, I forgot. Okay, so I can go into file, import. I pick in the XCR file that I wanted to bring in. And I'll pick conference demo.xcr. Next, pick a project. I'm trying to create a new project at this time because I don't have a matching ID in my EPS. For now, I'm just letting it go to the main EPS itself and finish. Okay. So at this point, I have the schedule over here imported. I can look at the activities for demo scenario. So all I see over here are all the activities that were brought in. They are placed into position. They are placed with relationships. You do have a dummy kind of a simple WBS in place over here. And you have the schedule in P6, basically.
And are those activity IDs auto-generated?
Yeah, so because NetPoint does not require an activity to have IDs, if you do not have activity IDs, they will be automatically generated for you, similar to how the default P6 IDs kind of generate, or you can actually set them. But yeah, if you have actual IDs specified in your NetPoint schedule, then those IDs are the ones that will transfer over to P6. Okay, so now we brought in, let's say, a schedule from one trade. Now let me try and bring in another schedule from which, let's say, came from another trade. So I'll open another schedule. So in this particular case, I'm bringing a part of it with part of the schedule, which is related to construction of the elevator or installing the elevator. Let me zoom out a little so that you can see more. Yeah, it's just a single path of work and times when the elevator works needs to be scheduled for. Yeah, one reason why I actually place the activities over there is the same thing, that I want these positions to be remembered when they go into P6. So I'm kind of managing it like that. I don't necessarily have to do that. It will only mean that, yeah, when they come into NetPoint over again, at that point, I'll have to manage them if I bring in the entire schedule as a whole thing into NetPoint at a later point.
So it looks like you could then have separate interactive planning sessions for different groups, and then the results of those independent planning sessions could be brought together into P6.
Absolutely. And that is what I will demo over here right now. So now I'll export this section out again to Primavera.
It looks like Brian has his hand raised. Should we pause and see what he's?
Yeah, actually, we did get a question from Eduardo, and he asked, did the WBS, was that set up automatically by P6?
I mean, it was by P6 or it was done before in NetPoint? That's my question.
Okay, so yeah, that WBS was actually created and available in the in NetPoint schedule. So if you look at tools, codes manager and WBS, you had that single node of superstructure in there, and certain activities assigned to superstructure. Everything else was just at the project level WBS node.
Okay, so it was created in NetPoint. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I saw a second question too. Is that right, Brian?
Let me check. See, I don't see anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so at this point, I'll export out this elevator work fragment. I'm using the same project ID as I used last time. I'm keeping all the settings the same. Next, export. And I'll make this conference demo scenario 2 and save. I go back into P6. I go into import. I pick up the XCR file, which is conference demo scenario 2. Press next. At this point, it sees that that project ID already exists in your P6 database. So it knows that it can probably match it. For the import action, I'm not trying to update existing activities. Rather, I'm trying to add into it. So I do that. And it's asking me for what level in the WBS do you want to import it into. I'll leave it at the top level. And I press next. Finish. This point imports those new activities into this P6 project. And if I scroll down now, I have those elevator activities now showing up. P6 puts in a dummy name for my new WBS node. Let me go into the WBS and I can actually rename it to be, let's say.
Looks like we have another question pending too, when you're at a breaking point.
Okay. Yeah, at this point, I do have my 2 schedules kind of merged into a single one. So I can go ahead and press F9 and schedule. Okay. So we have a question.
Yeah, so the question was, wouldn't assigning constraints cause CPM interruptions?
Absolutely. And that is why GPM avoids them. But yeah, if you do want to maintain dates, that if you wanted to maintain objects on their planned dates in P6, unfortunately, that's the only option.
Yes, can you hear me? Just
Yep.
wondering. Yeah, I was just, that question came from me. My name is Mohsen, and I mean, if constraint, I mean, especially constraint that are forwards, that, you know, when the schedule doing the forward path, is gonna most likely, my experience means it's gonna interrupt the CPM calculation. I mean,
Yeah.
what's gonna be the benefit of that schedule? Anyways.
Yeah, and that's the idea. So that is what we say for NetPoint, that NetPoint gives you that flexibility to put activities at a different date other than the early start date. Unfortunately, with CPM calculations, everything gets pushed to their early dates. So let's say if you were doing a simple resource balancing in your project, and you do end up having a particular resource above the limit, right? So at that point, you decide, okay, maybe I am running 3 different fronts on my site. Maybe I cut it down to 2 and work from the 3rd front a little later when some other resource gets released from a different place, right? So you shift that work later. How do you hold it over there in a CPM schedule? You cannot. Either you add in more links to kind of put it in place, but those links technically aren't required for that work to continue. That relationship is just to hold the activity in place, right?
Like a dummy.
Yeah. Or you put in a constraint to kind of say, yeah, I don't have an option. I constrain the activity over here. If in the future I get more resources, yeah, I will remember to remove that constraint and let this activity fall earlier. But unfortunately, that's how CPM works. That if you have activities that are not supposed to start on their early dates, you will need to constrain them. And that is something which GPM does not require. It allows you to put in, it gives you the flexibility to use up available float in your schedule and move an activity to a later date if that is what is preferred plan for the project.
No, that's perfectly fine. I mean, I understand the capability of that point, but my kind of, you know, concern would be if I present this, I mean, especially for some project that's, you know, like, you know, I'm working on MTA. I mean, probably they're not going to take the our software for the claim. They're going to be needing this kind of, you know, Primavera. So
Yeah.
everything we do there, it has to go to Primavera. And my point here is if you present something in our software and show that, you know, this is the solution or this is could be happening, in terms of legal, it has no value in a sense, because you can, when you transfer them, I mean, if you have to put constraint or some other stuff, and you cannot run it, I mean, it's going to interrupt the Primavera. I mean, how I could justify, or how would I, what would be the work around it? I mean, that's my question.
Yeah,
What
so
should I
if you don't want anything to be constrained, and again, I'm agreeing with you, constraints are a bad thing. It's not something that should be used without a valid reason at all. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But yeah, if you don't want any constraints in your P6 schedule, then you don't have to constrain, let's say in this particular case, I constrained equipment procurement. You don't have to constrain it. You absolutely don't have to constrain. That's fine. And it will go into P6 as an unconstrained activity. The only thing is, when you press F9 in P6, it will schedule it and shift this equipment procurement from 213 back to 23, because that's the early start date. And that's what I was saying. If you had an activity on a planned date in NetPoint and you wanted that date to be maintained in P6, then the only option for you is to override it with a constraint, because otherwise P6, the way how it works, it will shift the activity earlier to the early start date.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So at this point, if we were looking at the P6 schedule, we have the two fragments that I brought in from NetPoint, from two different NetPoint schedules into one single P6 project. So you can have, like Tim was earlier mentioning, you can have different sessions with different trades, maybe merge that in at a later point into a P6 schedule later. So you don't have to build the entire P6000 activity detail schedule in P6, but you can build pieces of it in NetPoint and then add it to your main schedule over here. So now let me do the opposite. Now we will go from P6 into NetPoint and show how that process works. So let me take this project itself. I'll say File, Export, and I'll export it out to conference demo and from P6. One thing to remember that before I exported, I did schedule my project. So it does have the corrected dates and everything. It doesn't have any object that hasn't really been made. So maybe you added an object, but it hasn't gotten its dates yet because CPM schedule, the CPM forward and backward pass hasn't run yet. So you want to do that because that way the XCR then gets the correct dates for that activity and any other information related to it. So you can bring it into into NetPoint. So now I have exported the schedule out. I'll open a new one. You don't necessarily have to open a new one, but yeah, I like to. I'll go into import from P6 XCR, and I'll pick the conference demo. Open. It gives you a list of all the activities that are in the P6 schedule. If you had more than one project, it will even give you a choice to select which project to actually import. And from this list, you can even think of bringing in just a small fragment. Like maybe I just wanted my elevator activities again, and I can filter them by saying elevator. So now I can only check these. I'll have to uncheck the others first, but yeah, I'll have to check these. These should be the only ones checked. For now, I will bring in the entire schedule and show you the benefit of starting from NetPoint and then going into P6. So because both of these schedules, all of these activities were actually built in NetPoint. Let me again zoom out a little so that we see more of the schedule. So if you see this schedule, when it came back from P6 to NetPoint, it has pretty much the same look. It didn't come in like a spaghetti bowl that you saw with the earlier import that Tim showed for the layout manager. So you don't necessarily, at this point, it's laid out the way you actually had it laid out before. It does not have elevator shops because we actually forgot to tie it into the elevator milestone. So let's see, because the elevator shops activities were not constrained, they actually shifted to their earliest states, which is the project start in P6. So yeah, maybe we wanted to go into, I have this elevator work milestone over here. I can go in and add a successor to it, which is the elevator shops. And then on the elevators, the punch list core and shell, I'll add ready for commissioning as a successor. So now they are all tied in. I press F9 again, schedule it, I can export the thing out again. And I'll save it again as conference demo scenario from P6 and save. Finish. Now I can go in and new. Import from P6. Importing everything. One thing I also did not mention earlier is this report that you're getting. It's always a good idea to export this to Excel. Means you can review the report over here. You don't necessarily have to export to Excel, but this is the only place you will see this report. After this, there is no way to get it back once you press finalize or cancel import. And this is basically telling you of changes or modifications that had to make to kind of make it work between P6 and MS Project. So kind of, if you looked at these two activities, these two were milestones in P6 because P6 does not have the concept of benchmarks. So any milestones in P6 with a must start on or a must finish on constraint automatically converts to a benchmark in NetPoint, kind of mimics that same behavior. There are certain calendar definitions because those calendars already existed. It renamed those calendars. If the global calendar was found, then it was used as is. And it gives you what the problem was, what the resolution was, and you can export it to Excel. For now, I'll just finalize the import. Let me reset the zoom factor again. And if you look at the schedule now, let me scroll down to the elevator work. Now the elevator work is tied down to the milestone and tied to ready for commissioning at this point.
Nice.
So at this
Looks like-
point, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, it looks like Brian has his hand raised again.
Okay.
Yes, we got another question. Is there an issue with the original duration for equipment procurement? In P6, it's shown as 1,260 days, and NetPoint it's 160 days.
Okay.
Let's see, that was from- You can unmute,
Okay,
Gerald.
so yeah, the durations over here right now in my P6 have been set to be shown in hours rather than in days. So you can actually go into user preferences, and instead of unit of time as hours, you can change it to days and close, and those will all change.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Sure. Good catch, though. Yeah, I didn't catch it for, I've been doing this demo for so many times now.
Might
Okay.
be a claims person on the phone with us.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, at this point, if you see, yeah, we have elevator shops, and again, we are not constraining it in this case. It's actually tied in. So elevator shops does not have any drift in this particular case, and so was brought back normally and was scheduled normally in P6. Okay. So if there are no further questions, then I'll continue on. The other part of the demo, so means we saw the round trip. So again, all of these activities were created in NetPoint. So they had position information. When they were exported out to P6, NetPoint remembered those objects when they came back in, because they still came back in now with that additional information that NetPoint sent to P6. And that information NetPoint is now using to lay it back as you had done it. So a benefit to starting the schedule or starting your activities in NetPoint, then taking it to P6, so that if you bring it back into NetPoint ever again, then yeah, they're laid out the way you want them to.
And it would work too, though, with the layout manager, right? If you brought it in straight from P6, use the layout manager, and then export it
Yeah.
back to P6, it'll remember the.
Yeah. So if if at any point that schedule was in NetPoint and then exported into P6, yeah, it will remember that positioning at that point and will always bring that back in. Yeah, it might not bring in all the layouts. It only remembers the current positioning.
That
So
makes
like,
sense.
let's say if you had multiple layouts in your layout manager, it will not bring those back in. It will
Right.
only bring the current state of how it looks.
But they're so easy to make, you can just remake.
Yeah, you can rerun layout manager to recreate the others. Okay. So that's one way of doing import and export, and the most direct way. There might be cases where you only want to do like partial P6 tasks into NetPoint, and you do have an interface to kind of do that. But an alternative approach is kind of to bring in a schedule from Excel into NetPoint. So one possibility that you also have is, let's say you have this schedule, you go File, Export, and you export it out as a spreadsheet. I'm doing activities, activity relationships. I'm doing demo scenario. Next. And finish. Okay. So if I look at my desktop, it should have the Excel file now. No, I thought I exported to my desktop. Maybe I did not. Let me do that again so that I see where I'm exporting it to this time.
Happens to me all the time.
No, I think that it's going to one place and then just doesn't. Okay, next. Oh, actually went to my documents. So I can go to my documents to pick it up. So in my documents, I have this demo scenario Excel file. I can open it and see what it has. Again, it has task codes for me. It has a status code. It has a WBSID, a task name. It has a start date, end date, and that's it. And it has predecessor information at some point and other user data that P6 could use if you were to modify this file and then import it back into P6. So right now, I will show only a simple import. I will remove this because I can leave them in. I don't have to remove any of these. So I have activity names, I have activity IDs, I have start dates and end dates. I don't have any other information right now. I can bring in predecessors and successors. I can show you a simple example of this. Let me just delete these for now. And let's say I have predecessors, so I can define predecessors. Let's say for ready for commissioning, or design NTP, let's pick one activity and I'll add a link to it, to something. So I know SD set and DD set are some of the beginning ones. So SD set to design NTP is the predecessor. So let me just put in its ID in SD set. I'm just creating one link, and then for DD set, I'll create a simple FS on that with SD set. So you can specify comma separated, you can specify an SS5 link. So that will provide an SS link with a 5-day lag on it. So the format is basically ID, the link type, and then the lag, and you can have them as comma separated. You can define predecessors. Oops, Control Y. Not press enter, or you can define successors. And then let's say I want to color some of these red or some of these blue and some of these green. So let me make this blue. Let me make this as gray. I'm hoping gray is one color that we support. There is a listing in the, I think the user guide, or also there is a color listing if you go into your documents, NetPoint app data, and actually public documents and NetPoint app data, there is a color listing for you. C: users public.
And these are the kinds of top secret insights you'll only get on the advanced training.
So public documents, NetPoint app data, and you have user colors, more of an XML. So over here, you can see black, white, red, lime blue, yellow, cyan, magenta, silver, gray. Gray is supported. So it just uses that list to kind of create these names. So you can give those. You can provide grid numbers if you wanted to, because again, since you're importing in from exporting from P6 into Excel and then Excel into NetPoint, you lose that position information, but maybe you didn't have that position information at all. So you can even put this in that, yeah, this should be on grid 10 and this should be on grid 11. So for now, I'm just doing it on those two activities, but again, you can bring it in any other, you can add that information to other objects too. And then if I go into NetPoint, over here, I do want to open a new file. Importing from P6 or MS Project or Open Plan works by always creating a new file before it imports and imports it into that new canvas. But importing from Excel, you can give different Excel sheets to different trades and have them put down their activities. Let's say you were doing a collaborative session and there were 3 groups that you wanted to kind of work and see how their activities will work together. You can give an Excel file, ask them for an Excel list of their activities with a name of when the expected start is, expected duration is, something of that sort, if they have any relationships and things like that. And you can bring in all of those into one file. So over here, I will go into import from Excel. I'll go to my documents and I'll pick demo scenario. So over here, when I pick demo scenario, okay, so it's basically just saying that it's open. It will not be able to give you any error messages if there were any. For now, I don't care about those. So over here, we gave you again, NetPoint provides a very flexible way of bringing in things from Excel. You didn't have to actually put that particular template or follow a template to kind of have it. You can map everything. So
that's
over
a big
here,
improvement. Our original one, you had to follow our template, and our template was not the world's most user-friendly. So this is a big improvement.
Yeah. So over here, I know all of my headers are actually in row 2. So that tells me what fields they are in, and my actual data starts from row 3. So I do exactly that. I tell it that my header row is row 2. It updates what columns you have, updates the first row to be the next one. It automatically managed to see which things it can map. So like activity ID automatically mapped to ID, activity name automatically mapped it to description. NetPoint doesn't know about optimistic or most likely or pessimistic durations because it doesn't care about them. It didn't identify the asterisk and the start, so it takes that. Let's fix it. Start and finish date, because we have both start and finish. We don't need any duration because that's kind of inherent in it. The codes are, or I'm turning off the fields that I don't want to import. I will import predecessors and successors, but yeah, you don't necessarily have to import both, because if you have all the relationships in one, the other one is automatically defined, and then the color and grid, and I import. So it quickly goes through the entire sheet. It tells you what places you might be missing something or what changes it had to do. Again, if you want this report copied to clipboard and pasted to a notepad or someplace, because other than this place, actually, other than this place, you would have gotten it in Excel if Excel file wasn't already opened. So for now, I'll finalize the import, and it places all my objects. I had a huge, it seems like, date range for some reason, some object kind of sitting somewhere. But these are the two activities. For all the other activities, I did not give it any positioning, but some activities did have positioning. So all of those just got placed on the first grid. But the others, the one I did provide a grid, I did provide a color, so you get those, and you could have laid out the entire schedule this way. You do see the relationships between them and everything. Okay. Any questions at this point?
It's looking terrific because, you know, so few people, I think, ever get to this level of detail in the import and export. So it's a super valuable information.
Yep. Yeah, different ways of bringing in data means I have used all of these features repeatedly for different kind of purposes. There have been cases where I've opened up multiple P6 schedules, which are kind of more of a portfolio kind of a thing, and picked up, like, let's say, just the summary activities. Now, if I'm bringing in summary activities into NetPoint, NetPoint will not bring in summary activities. It only brings in activities and LOEs. So how do I work with that? I'm trying to create just a summary schedule of that entire portfolio.
Right.
I select out those WBS summary activities and put that in my Excel file, import them into NetPoint as activities, and I have my summary schedule right there. I don't have to do anything with it now.
Right. Brian's got his hand raised.
Yeah, so another question that we got was, if you add new activities to P6, how will NetPoint treat them?
Okay. So again, over there, let's say it was a schedule that at some point was in NetPoint. It then went into P6. So you updated your P6 schedule at that point. And then after that, you went in and added more activities in P6. Those activities will stay in P6. They will not automatically appear in NetPoint. You'll have to do an export out from P6 again, and then import the schedule into NetPoint. At that point, your new activities do not have position information and will follow the same protocol. They will be laid on the top grid, so they are easily visible right on the import. That, yeah, these things probably need to be laid out at that point.
And they would align to their start date, right?
Yeah, they will be on their start date, but on the top grid, just like
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
So in this case, again, if I did a similar import, let's say for even this Excel file itself, but I just omit the grid positioning, then NetPoint will do a basic algorithm to lay it out. But again, it's not as thorough as Autograph, so you can do Layout Manager after you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And you can definitely do it that ways. And Autograph will lay out every activity for you, including the one that you had on the grid, unless you lock them up. I don't need the WBS code either. I'll bring in predecessor, I'll bring in color, but no grid in this case. So now if I import it, None of the objects have any grid information because grid information wasn't imported. So you see everything didn't get set off on the first grid, but instead did get set off. So it seems like the dates that came out from P6 weren't correct or something. Everything is kind of placed on the project start itself for some reason over here. So I have a bunch of activities that are on 10.3, 10.3. So yeah, these dates, when I copied over, I made a mistake or something, or maybe I didn't schedule the software, the project over there. And so that is what is causing problems over here, it seems.
And then, but you could still just run auto layout, right?
Yeah.
Unless,
Yeah, you can go in, and again, with Autograph, yes, it does have a lot of functionality, a lot of settings, but you don't need to always set them. I can go just press this button and it automatically takes the basic settings. It's not going to do a swim lane layout. It's not going to change any penalties. It has a default set of settings that it will use to lay out. In this particular case, not many links. So yeah, it cannot do as good of a job because it doesn't know any relationship, which activity is related to which. So it just places them in a manner that they don't overlap. Okay. Any other questions, Brian?
Not that I'm seeing it.
Okay. Yeah, at this point, that kind of concludes my demo portion of working with P6. Again, yeah, you have the options, similar options for working with MS Project. You have it, have an import export with Open Plan. You have we also have some functionality that allows NetPoint to work with Synchro.
yep.
Yep.
You know, it just occurred to me, I had forgotten to mention this morning, and it's probably advanced, which is probably why I didn't mention it, but one of those cool features I showed this morning where you can do an embedded object on an activity and link out to a document or something. One of our clients had this great application where there were certain critical activities they really wanted to keep an eye on. And so they used the embedded object in the activities that they wanted to keep an eye on. And they actually put a webcam out looking at that structure of work that was being worked on. And so anytime that they wanted to check on the progress on that activity, they just went to the link and looked at the webcam, which I thought was so smart.
Yep. Very, means again, innovative tools, but our users have used it in even more innovative ways that we didn't think of using it ourselves.
That's true.
Yep.
Well, if we don't have other questions, I think that's our, oh wait, we have a question. We have a question. All right. Schedule baseline available in NetPoint. Yeah. Do you want me to drive for that, or do you want to drive?
Either way.
Let me just make sure I've got that file handy, which I think I do. Is everybody seeing my NetPoint screen at this point?
Yep, can.
Okay, great. So this is a schedule that we developed particularly to show that feature with the baseline. And it's a pretty innovative approach. Oftentimes in the past, we've had people, well, I really want to be able to compare my baseline to after I progress the schedule to see where it stands. And we were so driven to do things visually and graphically that we had to figure out how to demonstrate this graphically before we could really lock into it. So that's that turned into visual target mode, which is a really cool set of features in the tool. So within visual target mode, you can set particular filters. So in this case, we set up one filter that says if something's 5 days behind or more, then make that activity larger and dark green. And I will say that if it's on the critical path, it's going to remain red. And I think, Vivek, you can probably tell me a way to still show the criticality. I think we have a wrap now, but anyway, I'll continue on. And then if it's 5 days ahead of schedule, then it makes it smaller in light green. So we want to show the variances, and we want to put a shadow for the baseline. We're going to go ahead and apply this. And now you can see that the schedule has changed somewhat. After this update, it looks like we had 5 days of slippage from our baseline, the baseline being the gray. And we had 5 days of slippage on bid and award steel, which then pushed shops. And you can see that 5 days, since this is critical, it's pushing it all the way through the network to the end. On the other hand, it looks like our comp CD set started earlier than we thought and finished earlier than we thought. So we gained 5 days there. And so within the tool, you can compare different schedules. Each schedule update, let me go ahead and drop a date on here so you can see this bit of functionality. But each schedule update is going to show you this box, and it's going to say, do you want to capture this? And the answer is always yes. We probably shouldn't even ask the question anymore. I think we should just capture it. But anyway, so now we've captured this, this snapshot, and then as we make changes to the schedule, so let's push this back. Oh, we can't push that back. Why can't we? Can I shorten that duration?
You can shorten it, but you can't push it back because.
Oh, right. Yeah, I just wasn't. I wasn't quite there. Yeah. So now you can see that we're 8 days, saving 8 days from our last update, and so it's shrunken to a smaller one because it's no longer behind. Whereas bid award steel is still behind, so it's still larger. So it's a really cool interactive graphic that demonstrates to everybody where you stand against your baseline or your previous update. You can choose which one you want to do. So you're gonna have to remind me where to see that. Is that
Open Targets Manager?
Thanks. Yep. Yeah. So here you get to choose which comparison you're gonna make.
Hold on, maybe another question. Let me see.
Okay.
He asked if I created a baseline in NetPoint, can I also import to P6 both baseline and current schedule?
So you can export from NetPoint the two separately. So the target information does not go into P6 as a separate schedule. You would have to have the two states as separate NetPoint schedules exported into P6 and then in P6 assign a baseline.
So basically just one snapshot of the schedule saved as baseline and another one first update. And then you would export both of those to P6, but it doesn't automatically go with all this fancy formatting. Okay.
And then in P6, you would have to mark for the first update, the baseline schedule as baseline.
All right. If we don't have other questions, then we really appreciate you spending the day with us and this part of the day in particular.